I wanted to say a big thank you to our sponsor, Talent Insights. Talent Insights are Australia's leading data specialist recruitment business. They are experts in recruitment strategy and delivery for analytics and data teams. They are the go-to recruitment business for all your data roles in Australia, and they can help both with permanent hires and short-term project-focused data resources. I've used Talent Insights in the past, and I've always found them fantastic to work with. Visit them at talentinsights.com.au. Is your organization using AI but struggling to deploy or scale or get value from AI in production? Then come join us on our webinar that we have specifically designed to help you improve that area, to get more value from AI, to scale AI. The event is on November 17th. It's going to be called Scaling AI Successfully with MLOps. We are super excited to create this event in Australia. It's one of the first, if not the first, MLOps focused event in Australia. So come join us with a wide range of speakers covering the whole gamut that is involved in MLOps. We're going to have roundtables, we're going to have panel discussions, and we're going to have presentations. So you'll get to mingle with peers who are facing similar challenges and get to discuss the approaches that they're taking and also learn from some of the industry experts that we put together. To find out more, go to datafuturology.com/events. It's a free event focusing on MLOps, first time in Australia. I'm super excited to bring this event to the community. I hope to see you there. Hi, and welcome everyone to Data Futurology. My name is Felipe Flores. I am your host in Data Futurology. We speak with leaders and executives from around the world that work in the analytics, data science, and AI space. We get their use cases, their challenges, and bring you different perspectives to help you increase the adoption of AI in your organizations and overcome the challenges that come in adopting and getting value from this transformative technology. Today, we're going to be hearing from a legend in the industry, a man who's built a unicorn company in the space, and their motto is to leave no one behind with AI. That's incredibly empowering, considering the amount of people in organizations that need to be taught how to interact and use AI in order to have the transformations that we're seeking in our companies. So I could not think of a better guest than to have Florian Dotau. He is the CEO of Dataiku. Florian, thank you so much for coming on the show. Welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Felipe. And how are you doing yourself?
Doing very, very well. I've been looking forward to this chat, and thank you so much for making the time. So at the beginning, I wanted to ask you about your origin story, how you got into data and how you went on to start what is now a unicorn in the space.
Well, I got into data in a sense pretty early in my career. I'm more a mathematician by trade, but mathematics at some point were frustrating to me because it's real, of course. I'm a mathematician, so I believe mathematics is real, but it's not real as in like you don't feel things, you don't have an impact on things and so forth. And I was back in 2000 into the question of like, oh, can I do things with actual data? And back then, actual data was scarce and lots of data was not terabytes. It was about doing things with gigabytes. In fact, back 20 years ago, and I went into the web space, web search space, and so forth, because that's where data was. And I think I kept my career looking for data, finding data. I think I found data now, probably. And back then, 8 years ago, I was for a few years working with various tech companies, helping them building their data stack. And it was very frustrating to just getting things to work, not just from a technology perspective, because I guess technology, you can always make it work to some extent if you have some skills and trade, but from a cultural perspective. I remember this awful meeting where I was putting together in a pre-IPO kind of company, people from the data scientist team and people from the business team. And it was all about working on the company data. And for whatever reason, they were each sitting on one side of the table. Like they couldn't mingle. They just could like, yeah, it's your fault. You don't have the right data. You don't understand the problem. Well, you keep getting things done, but like you don't tell us. And whatever the way I would organize the meeting, they would just every time split each side of the table. And so that's kind of like, oh, I got into the idea of building a platform because, well, I guess that when you've got a problem and you want to solve it at scale, software is a good solution.
100%. So you definitely, you had the background, the interest in the space. You wanted to go from sounded like a more theoretical world in the space of mathematics and moving into a practical application of the discipline and moving into data, seeing the problem and then grabbing the bull by its horns, jumping right in. What was the early days of Dataiku like? How was leading up to starting, early days in the organization? How was that time for you?
Meaning it was a great time, especially because it was also a great time back 8 years ago in the space of data. If you remember well, back then we were all talking about big data. Do you remember this moniker?
Yeah.
Well, we don't use it anymore, I guess. But it was big data everywhere, and lots of technologies to connect and to make them together work. The interesting part back then for us was the realization that if we wanted, meaning when we designed the early version of a product, we realized that ultimately it was all about making AI accessible to lots of people in the organization. If I'm intellectually honest, back then we were not talking about AI, but more like data science, meaning the same thing, but like ultimately data science being accessible to lots of people in the organization. And when I was looking backward to what had happened to other evolution of the data space, like business intelligence, I realized that it took like 20 or 25 years for business intelligence to become more self-service inside organizations. And I think the main factor that was an hindrance to business intelligence being widespread was the fact that whatever the advance in terms of the reporting itself, data itself was a problem. As in like getting the data preparation and so forth, you always have, when you want to do self-service, a choking point at the beginning of the funnel of value. And that's why when we designed and thought about Dataiku, we were like, data management, data science, it's not like separate pieces of the puzzles. They are just two sides of the same coin. And we need, whatever happens, to design a product where both sides actually appear. And that's kind of like one of the design principles of the product. Do not leave data behind to start with, that we started with.
It's great to find the challenges that other parts of the data space had, like what was difficult for BI to move into a self-service space, and start honing on that first when it comes to AI and data science. That's fantastic. In learning about the history of our industry. And I really like this, the concept that you guys have about leaving no one behind and bringing everyone together to work in this space. Could you tell me about where that came from and what your outlook is for that mission?
Yeah, the challenge of the data space is that if you want to have a full impact, you need to encompass the business as part of the transformation. And for at least two reasons. One, if you want your any data project to have an impact, it must actually have also an impact on the business process that will be using the data. And so in order to do that, you need people to actually understand and with a good understanding of the business process to actually co-design the analytics with you. And second, the sheer reality of our space is that there is still a shortage of skills in terms of people having core technology skills, like people doing Python to simplify, available on the market. And in order to just get things done, I think there was a huge challenge of actually enabling people without having the technological skills, meaning the Python skills and so forth, to actually participate and have an impact on data projects. Just math. You don't have enough data scientists doing Python on Earth to just build all the data analytics you need in the sense of data science, advanced AI-powered analytics. And then there is also, from my perspective, a question of just society and balance, where if you want the AI revolution to have the right impact, it's actually better if there is a balance in terms of like who is behind the wheel, not just the geeks receiving orders from executives. You need business stakeholders to actually also participate to this revolution. So for those three reasons, alignment with actual business need, shortage of skills, and societal balance, you need, I think, more platform enabling business stakeholders participating to data science and AI projects, and actually more and more doing and building them by themselves.
And that's extremely exciting. Getting to giving people opportunity to build it themselves, and as well as being able to, as you were saying before, being able to sit on the same side of the table and actually collaborate and co-design how this technology is going to be built and used in organizations, let alone getting that into production, all in the one platform and easy to do. What is the impact that you think this type of mission has in the world, and particularly with the focus on the low code and no code and that your platform provides? Where do you think this can take organizations? Where do you think it can take the world?
I think it actually, so from the perspective of our customer, it enables them to actually change in a kind of profound manner the way certain business lines or functions work. Because it's not just about having this new shiny AI tool somewhere on the side. It's about, for some of them, changing the day-to-day work of a significant percent of the employees of the business line. To give a concrete example, for instance, we have customers where their financial planning and analytics team, the FP&A teams, are changing radically the way they do their day-to-day work, the way they automate their work by leveraging our platform. One such customer, for instance, is Standard Chartered Bank. And automation in FP&A is critical because that's kind of like the core of your job. Meaning, if you're not automated from an FP&A perspective, you could spend way too much time in manual process, which is usually called copy pasting in Excel, which is not that fun, is time consuming. With the new challenges of the various digital revolution and so forth, you have more and more transactions, and you also have more and more constraints in terms of how to report data and financials. And there is a need of just more automation to make just your work more interesting. And so filling this gap between the intelligence, the mind, meaning all the things you're building, the smart metrics or the smart intelligence you put into financial models, into something you can automate, is something that I think changes just the work of those people. And that's, I think, by itself, super interesting.
It is. It definitely is super interesting. Where do you think this automation of work is going to take us, and how should people think about automating their work?
I think there is a combination of let's say desire and fear when people talk about automating the world, and which relates to the various stages of industrial revolution we've been into, where for each of them there were some challenges in order to make them happen in the society. Like when you automate something, when the robots are replacing you, what is happening to you? That's kind of like a form of question everyone has back of its mind. And indeed, in this, if we stretch this line from a 5 to 10 years perspective, data science platform, analytics platform, AI platform in the enterprise are enabling to build some form of assets. We call them models or whatever, that are automating a specific part of the work, which is decision making. Meaning that's a piece that is essentially, instead of you behind your screen looking at the data and spending lots of time on it, deciding for something, this piece will either reduce drastically the time you need to spend in order to take the decision, or maybe in some situation, take the decision for you and nothing will happen on your screen. It will be completely automated as a business process. And that's what this is about, ultimately. Building automated decision-making building blocks within the enterprise. And the question from a work perspective is that it does question the meaning of work from the perspective of people that are taking decisions today. Because if like 80% of my perceived value, meaning the reason why I wake up in the morning, put a shirt, get behind my screen and so forth, is actually because, my brain is good at taking these decisions and I take them consciously. I feel responsible about the decision and so forth and so on. But if those decisions are taken away from me, what is the actual meaning of my job? That's a very concrete question that is interestingly actually a question for many different layers in the enterprise. We are not talking about like a specific hierarchical layer of the enterprise that could be impacted. Ultimately, even I can easily imagine that even myself as a CEO of a company, at some point, you could have some of the decisions I take that are automated by AI to some extent.
Yeah.
So the underlying question is like, how do we keep some meaning to work? And from my perspective, that's where the how you build it is important, because I think that we need to embark people taking decisions today within this process of building those decision-making building blocks, which is back to the question of business stakeholders participating to the creation of AI. It's not just to actually make that happen in the right way, it's also to create the possibility of a change where people keep understanding what is the meaning of their work. You need to just transition, I think, lots of it's far-reaching. From a 5, 10, 15-year perspective, there is a transition in terms of what I'm doing as an individual. The starting point is I'm taking individual decisions behind my screen. The end point is that I keep building and refining automated decision system. And so the question is like, how do you enable people to do that?
Yes, exactly. And how do you see that change for you in your role, as you were saying, as a CEO of a company where some decisions can be automated? What is it going to look like as we go further into that time horizon?
That's a deep question. If you look at trends on the market, you obviously have, from the perspective of an organization, impacts not only on core functions of the company. And so in the case of a company like a software company, core functions are usually functions related to how you operate sales, support, and so forth. And indeed, what we see as trends on the market is that more and more the way you score your customer, the way you target your customers, the way you understand which customer might require more help and so forth is driven by automation of metrics telling you where to look at. It means very concretely that as a decision maker, you don't receive a health check from your customer coming from a subjective view built by your field. More and more, you're receiving things that are automated in terms of alerts coming from the field. And but it also has an impact, and you also see trends that are, I guess, also to be better understood in terms of support functions. For instance, in HR, we see more and more situations and context where people want to be able to automate a part of the HR process, as in understanding how to better assess candidates, how to better assess HR situation, how to better understand that an employee is at risk, and so forth. And yeah, indeed, it's an interesting question because when you apply each of those new techniques, it may have an impact on the culture of the company. And so as a decision maker, I think it's key to understand how AI is used in the organization because you have an idea of what it will do, but it's very hard to understand what you will lose by actually switching to this kind of system. And I guess that's why it's a responsibility of decision makers at every level to actually understand what data and AI actually means for the organization.
Yeah, definitely. So it sounds like and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the world that you envisage is that essentially AI and humans will be working almost collaboratively, that the decisions that can be automated will move more and more into automating them, but that then those decisions will provide information back to the human to be looking at specific things or new alerts, new patterns, help make some decisions there and maybe look to automate some more of that, and that there will be sort of a continual flow between the two parts. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that we already see that data and AI is used in many different ways with at least 4 tiers of system, meaning you've got the baseline where you just report on the data. You've got the one where you augment existing reports on data, leveraging advanced techniques and AI in order to pinpoint potential issues and so forth. You've got a layer where you actually provide various suggestions and assistance to decision making, as in like, you should do that for this and that reason, and so forth, coming usually as a dedicated app supporting decision-making process. And you've got the layers of automation, where you almost have automation with, you've got variants with automations with some human in the loop as part of it, as in like 80-90% of things are automated. You've got the 10% where you need some additional human supervision, and you've got the highest level of automation of processes that are completely automated up to the point that it's just about monitoring the model. And you do have today application ranging for all of that spectrum, but indeed, I think there is a need to make sure that the high-value differentiated applications in your organization stays with human in the loop if you actually want to create a culture around it in your organization. And if it makes sense also, like credit card payment, it needs to be completely automated. Because it's ultimately the detection of fraud itself at the level of each individual transaction is not that high value. And there is a physical need of these things to be happening all the time with some level of SLA. So you want and we need to automate it. But determining if someone is worth a credit for buying a house, it's not the same situation. And you don't want actually to automate it in the same way. And so for each businesses, for each industry, there is a need of understanding where we want to put this cursor of automation, which have implication of like what is the culture of the company, what is customer and customer relationship from the perspective of this company. And understanding this design of AI in the organization is almost a new discipline of like automation design that is new to the enterprise. Because you have usually a head of human resources that is thinking about human resources in a certain way, but the IT function thinks in terms of systems. The IT function does not think in terms of automation and the design of automation throughout the organization. And so it's today a mix of conversation between head of analytics, head of IT, but usually head of business function to understand where they want to put that. Mm-hmm. But this conversation is probably not completely mature compared to where it should be from a 10 to 15 years perspective.
Man, I love that. That is excellent. Like having the design of automation as a capability in an organization. It's definitely something that would be a game changer. Having it as a key focus like that, because the consumer needs and the consumer wants are endless. So they will always continue to rise with better products, better services provided, and so there'll always be a need to fulfill that, which means that there'll always be a space for innovation and creativity, and being able to automate the provision of the services is it's great. It's great. And and I really like the fact that you're also accounting for things that may not be foreseen, as in maybe like innovations that for like one that comes to mind for me is something like Cirque du Soleil, that for like 100 years before that, the circus industry had been in decline in terms of revenues, and that then and they were working in certain ways by having animals and traveling and having multiple rings, and that then the innovation was, let's do this circus thing but completely different, and let's have one ring, let's have no animals, very highly trained professionals. And that in the first 20 years the revenues exceeded what had been done by the entire industry the previous 100 years, and that it's innovations like this that continue to have, it sounds like they continue to have a space while it continues to have a space in different levels that you were mentioning about how automated decisions should be according to what type of decision they are, how core they are to the business, to the business itself, and what the business wants to do in the future. Is that in line with what you were saying?
Yeah, it's in line. I think it's in line, and indeed a good illustration. I think an organization is into a forever fight between, meaning understanding what is their business, and usually they start with like some form of mystery of problem. Then you have people inside the organization finding a solution or heuristics in terms of how to solve it, and then you need to automate. And indeed, there is a first obvious shocking point is that if you don't automate enough, you stay in this stage where people using heuristics make it happen and so forth. But you never actually automate enough so that you can get back into understanding what could be a different world. And from that perspective, you could argue that, it might be a terrible comparison, so sorry if it is for people working in circus, but that the previous embodiment of circus was using heuristics of like the ways of making people come to circus, that was indeed working. and was a certain lifestyle, but that in a sense, Cirque du Soleil just automated it from the perspective of how it could be automated in a new digital world where people can all travel to whatever location, Las Vegas, where digital media enables you to actually just create a new brand using color and images and so forth in a different way. And where in order to be widespread, you just need to have something that is associated to art and not necessarily animals because you want to own the brand in order to be the best brand. And so all of that was a way to automate the practical of circus in order to possibly just reinvent in 5 or 10 years something new from the perspective of what should be real life and circus arts. But then again, the question of similarly for the enterprise, you need to automate, but understand where you want to automate and keep your heuristics because you don't want to lose people and creativity in between.
Yeah, definitely. That's really nice. Yeah, that's really nice. That definitely don't want to lose that creativity and understanding the possibilities of what the customer desires and how those could be met. But you do want to bring a lot of this automation design. This is great. I wanted to ask you for where did the focus on enterprise come from? From at least from my perspective, it seemed to me that you guys were one of the early organizations that focused on enterprise AI, and obviously have done so exceedingly well. Do you think, or maybe two-part question, do you think that you guys were early on enterprise AI, and why did you focus on that side?
Yeah, I think that we focused on enterprise AI quite early because initially we wanted to build a product having an impact. And from my perspective, the interesting challenge of AI was not about providing yet another technology to be used by tech firms and startup companies, which was a lot of what it was in the early days for lots of organizations. It was a lot about actually building the product for most enterprise so that no enterprise is left behind. There is indeed, when you look at it from afar, there is sometimes a frustration from people and organization related to this data revolution. You can feel overwhelmed by the size of the data revolution and its speed. You can feel overwhelmed by the fact that the data will start deciding for you, but also by the fact that the digital giants will, with all of their data and all of their technology, will just crush you from a long-term perspective of a company. It's like a new conflict. And I think that from that perspective, I wanted to take the side of the old enterprise, as in regular organization, like the one I like and I live in and I actually use on a day-to-day basis, could change themselves and leverage data. It was at the beginning of Dataiku, obviously, something that we needed a lot to work on, just because from our perspective, it was not just to build a website and a credit card kind of software. It was about building an enterprise-ready kind of software in terms of security, in terms of where you install, internal flexibility, and so forth. It was lots of work, but in my first 10 days of careers, I was doing C and C++ on lots of exotic operating systems, and then delivering that as a software. So, meaning I felt ready to actually do the hard thing of actually delivering to the enterprise, just because I'm, and I think because of the background of myself and the other founder of the company, we felt ready to actually get that extra mile, but actually very important mile to deliver to the enterprise, whatever their context, whatever their data warehouse, whatever their situation, meaning don't wait for everybody to be in the cloud. Otherwise, you'll wait for years and years. And so that's, I think, indeed part of the DNA of Dataiku is to serve the enterprise and to be at this very beginning of enterprise AI.
Exceedingly ambitious vision from the start, because the servicing the enterprise, it requires such a huge lift when it comes to privacy, security, and data management in general. So there's you decided to take on a much greater challenge in order to help transition this or to help update this part of the market in terms of these enterprises and help them come into the new economy. That is like hats off, man. That's been amazing.
No, but I think it's also easier to have this perspective because we were not starting from the West Coast Bay Area ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, when I think that a huge bias you have when you start any kind of company in the Bay Area ecosystem is that you want to serve people around you, which are other tech firms.
Yeah.
The reality is that in terms of data, tech firms do require some help and so forth, but like ultimately, the kind of leverage you have is limited because they can do things by themselves.
Yeah.
For most of them.
Yeah.
And will do things by themselves in their own way because anyway they're building a product from scratch at the same time usually. When you serve a startup. The actual challenge when you have an impact to the world is indeed when you serve the enterprise because that's where the important data is. That's where you have an impact on real life economy and so forth. And I think that's what I found interesting first and foremost.
That is a really good point. That the where people are gives them a particular vantage point that helps shape the decisions that they make, and that there are benefits in not being in Silicon Valley, essentially, and that sometimes founders might feel like they're missing out if they're not starting in Silicon Valley. But from your perspective, it sounds like there's benefits as well.
Yeah, I think there are some benefits in some circumstances. I think that when you start when you look technology from a Silicon Valley perspective, the good thing is that you've got lots of de facto competition because you have lots of peers you can talk to, and so you want to sharpen your positioning. But it leads also to situations where you just focus on a narrow niche perspective, trying to build it into a grandiose category. Whereas in some situations, the actual innovation is about seeing something as a whole more holistically and just go in that direction, even if it means that you don't actually completely differentiate compared to all of your peers sitting at the next table in the cafe. Which is where innovation happens on the Silicon Valley, indeed. And so in the cafe. So in some situations, being not into the ecosystem, I think has an interesting impact in terms of like just helping you building a broader vision that might be not completely conventional.
That is great. That is great. Definitely one for people that feel like they might be missing out. If they're not there or starting companies there, then this is a very, very interesting point of view. So there's a couple of things that I really like about the way that you think about the space. And tell me which one of these you'd like to jump into maybe first. One is around the life cycle of projects and bringing everyone together into throughout that life cycle, so focusing on the collaboration. And the other side is around the responsible and explainable AI, which is obviously exceedingly interesting. Which one of those would you like to tackle first?
Yeah, well, I guess we can, starting with the life cycle.
Mhm.
Indeed, when building the Taiku, we thought of building the product end to end, as in like, how can you capture the full life cycle of data and AI? When I look at it now, I think it's indeed interesting as a perspective, because the natural state of AI project is almost to have four, indeed, four different levels of life cycle that are sometimes independent, as in you've got the data life cycle, then you've got a model life cycle,
Mhm.
you've got then how you operate an app and monitor it, and you've got a project lifecycle in terms of the project, how you start it, how you ideate, and how you build the ID. So, sorry, it's complicated, but in real life, indeed, people tend to have four different layers of lifecycle with usually four different stakeholders at each of those levels.
Yes.
And indeed, if that's the reality, that's why it's complicated, because if you got four different project managers to achieve one thing with different stakeholders, all of that as Russian dolls, of course, that's kind of complicated to get things done. And as a platform, one of our motto is to build a platform with a consistent life cycle where you can start with the data and end with the project and the understanding of what's the value of the project, so that you can get a consistent view. I think that it's just about, in essence, deconstructing all the ideas of like what should be the life cycle of data and AI, so that you end up with only one platform and one life cycle in order to get those things done properly. And yeah, that's, I think, profoundly what the future state of a data project should be. It's hard to change that, but we are getting there. I think with the platform we are building.
Right. If there's anything that the trajectory of Daraiku has shown is that you're able to call it early, as in like where the need is, you call it early and you build to it really really well and are ready when the demand comes, like when the market is ready, you're there. This sounds like another example of that.
Yep. Well, I hope so. And kind of like related to that, there is a question of explainability of models and AI, which ultimately boils down to lots of I would say basic capabilities of any data science platform, as in the ability to understand the weights of models, what is variable impacting this as models, to understand what if, and help people understand why this particular decision is taken and why another decision could have been taken and so forth by a model. I think what I feel still frustrating is that we see the need of that on the market. It's getting used in some areas, but where ultimately it was also used before. I'm still afraid that explainability is a checkbox kind of feature where people want more explainability for models, but that it's still not ingrained in the practice of building models. Meaning we are only half there in terms of practical practice of explainability. And that's that's still frustrating for me. And it's almost not about, I don't think it's about technology per se, because it's not rocket science. Even today, you start having for complex deep learning models and so forth, you start having good technology to help you understand why even a classification for an image was done in a certain way. So even for complex situation, you start having a good reasonable technology to use it. But then how it becomes part of the business process is still to be determined so that it's not just a checkbox of like, yeah, we have explainability, but like something actually part of the process.
Yes. So what do you think? What do you think? What do you think are the barriers or that are stopping that actual adoption? Or what? Well, yeah. What do you think will be needed to change that?
I think it's related to the. Ultimately, it's a matter of change management on the last mile of AI. Meaning the notion of explainability itself, meaning you've got the back office explainability as in the person doing the model being able to check things, which is important and fine. But in order to create a widespread usage of explainability, again, you might need to also think about how models prediction are used and build applications where every decision, meaning like it's almost as if every time a decision of a model was shown on a screen somewhere, you could click on it and have the explanation within the same context, as in within the business application itself, so that the business users themselves could start questioning the models. And it's not just about explainability, it's about questionability.
Yeah.
Meaning it's the ability not just to see why the decision was taken, it's the ability to have someone raising their hand and say like, yeah, I'm not sure if this was the right decision. Which otherwise, ultimately, if you just explain without opening you up yourself to questions, well, you just you just given, and like the only people able to express and ask questions are not the modelers themselves. Sometimes those are the people operating and seeing those decisions in real life that have the actual perspective that the decision is questionable. And so that's why it's difficult. It's because last mile AI, it's about like, a decision is then used into a business system. If you just need to push a decision, you just push a table somewhere in your Salesforce or whatever business app, and the decision is, or the customer score is made available to the user, and it's easy to integrate. It's more complex from just a business perspective, a UI perspective, to also give to this same operator not just the score or a table, but this ability to have the why of the model and then question back.
That is an excellent point, because some of the reasons that I was thinking about is the level of effort that at least in my experience that I've seen requires to get into the details of how the decisions are being made. And generally it takes a very extremely eager stakeholder to say like, give me the explainability for each decision. They need a lot of domain knowledge and to be able to review them or question them in batches. But you've turned that on its head by saying, well, let's disseminate it to where the decision is being used. And then people could be able to question the decision at that particular point, which is fantastic. I think some people, some data scientists might feel that sometimes stakeholders can lose focus when the majority of decisions are being taken as good and better than what it was before, but that there's a subset and sometimes a minority of decisions that are not as good as they could be, and sometimes they pick on those decisions, or at least data scientists might feel that stakeholders focus on those decisions, and sometimes they want to strive for perfection across the board. What would you say to people that are facing those type of conversations in their organizations?
Hmm. To some extent, it relates to previous conversation we had. I think it's the potential choking point of AI in the near future is about change and cultural change. As in, as we automate, you need to make more and more people aware of what automation and AI is, so that they can get the best of it. And in order to make that happen, it's easier if you help them participate and be part of the building of the decision engine themselves. And that's ultimately it's all change management. If you want to make sure that people have the right bandwidth and the right focus at the end of the change, at the beginning of the change, you need to create desire and put things in context. And I think that's it's not about the current situation. It's about like, oh, you make people move. I think that's how decision makers should think about it.
Yes, definitely. I think that definitely in change, focus on change, a greater focus on change management is required. And I think, as you say, particularly in the first step around the awareness that the change is required and why. So that's really good, mate. And getting customer satisfaction requires so many things done right within an organization when it comes to the culture, to the product, to the customer interactions. What would you say are some of the things that that you guys have focused on internally that helped get to this point and this award?
I think we have a particular focus on some aspect of the product quality, as in meaning making sure that there are no shortcuts of the product that could be an hindrance to some customer when they try to apply it to a real life context. As in, like, we checked that it works in a real life customer scenario that could need this and this particular things, this and this kind of like flexibility, this or this security constraints. So this level of thoroughness in terms of product quality, I think, is important to get practical satisfaction in the enterprise. And second is support, and which we provide through both customer community, so that people can have a direct connection with Dataiku themselves, but also with traditional technical support channels. And here again, it's all about making sure that when you give an answer, you give the real answer. You respond quickly, but like you don't just answer something that makes no sense from a customer perspective. Like customer people don't understand what is happening. They don't give me the real answer. They're just buying time. You don't want to actually get into that when you are building a strong support channel, because people are not stupid. They want the real answer, even if it means that you won't get your exactly what you want. Getting straight and authentic when you answer to customers at all levels is, I think, key.
Key. That is key. That is so true. So instead of pandering, giving the right support, the right answer, definitely something that customers value. Mate, this I just looked at the time. Crazy how quickly this has flown by. Florian, this has been fantastic. I really want to thank you so much for your time, for sharing your experience and your insights, your thoughts about the future and how it's coming, how it can be further developed, and the vision that you have. As I said during the show, I think you have a particular knack for picking what's coming and being ready to deliver on that by the time it comes. And it's been amazing to get to unpick your brain a bit and getting to see the inner workings of how that's done. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your perspectives, and your experience with us today.
Well, thanks a lot, Felipe, and I'm also looking forward for the next episode of Data Futurology.
Amazing, too kind. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. I hope that you got a lot out of this discussion. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel so more people can find out about the challenges that leaders have in the analytics and AI space. And that's what we're trying to share in Data Futurology. So please like and subscribe. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Thank you so much.